with us tonight, we also have, along with Department for Medicaid Services, we have the Department for Aging and Independent Living, who also operates and administers, our legally responsible individuals, participant direct services. So they are with us tonight as well. They are, we all work together within the Cabinet for Health and Family Services on the participant direct services. So again, thank you for joining our question and answer session for the 1915C Home and Community-Based Services HCBS waiver participants. This is kind of in follow-up to the webinar that we had on June the 10th that you all attended. And so what we did was we just captured some of the most common questions, and we will be going through those as well as kind of recapping the deck that we discussed on June 10th. So again, we're just we will recap the participants and families on DMS policies and procedures for employing a legally responsible individual as a PDS employee. Last week, again, on June 10th, we discussed during our PDS webinar, who was legally responsible, who those individuals were, who must go through the approval process, why the approval process is in place, and how to apply for approval. And again, we're going to go over some of those common questions and we will also go back through the deck and clarify anything that we need to. So implementing the updated legally responsible individual review process. So this process will begin on July 1st of 2024. It will apply to the acquired brain injury acute, acquired brain injury long-term care, home and community-based, Michelle P. waiver, and supports for community living. The review request submitted will be through the Medicaid waiver management application with your participant direct services case manager's assistance. These requests will be reviewed by the Department for Aging and Independent Living. Who is considered a legally responsible individual? So for a minor child younger than 18, those are parent, step-parent, adoptive parent, or guardian. And that guardian is defined as an individual, agency, or corporation appointed by the district court to have care, custody, and control of a minor to manage the minor's financial resources. So also, there is, while they are a legally responsible individual, foster parents cannot be paid as the participant direct services employee due to receiving payment from the state for the provision of foster care. And again, there's a link in this deck that we will post related to that. For legally responsible individual, those are for an adult 18 or over, spouse or guardian, and that's a guardian's a person appointed by the court to make decisions regarding the person of an adult. For the legally responsible individual review criteria, we are going to be focused here on this slide, children, and that's minor participants younger than the age of 18. So you will have to meet one of the category A criteria, one of the three. So the first one, the child's care needs have reduced or eliminated the legally responsible individual's ability to maintain paid employment in the past 12 months or longer, and there is not an alternative caregiver who is functionally able to provide that care. So some examples of that might be, or may include, but is not limited to, a caregiver must leave work often to provide care to the participant, reducing their hours of work, or a caregiver frequently takes leave of absence from work to provide care to the participant, eliminating hours of work, and scheduling job interviews becomes a challenge because of the care needs of the participant. Category A, number 2, the legally responsible individual can demonstrate attempts within the first 30 days to recruit a qualified provider, traditional or participant direct services, but cannot secure one. Some examples may include, but not limited to, that there are no providers or no PDS employees willing to travel to the participant's home or work during the required time frames, or like the nearest traditional provider is not willing to drive, 60 miles to a home, or providers or participant direct service employees are not willing to provide the type of care the participant requires, such as transferring someone or providing personal care. In category A, number 3, the minor child has a communication barrier exceeding that of his or her age-matched peers that impacts his or her ability to effectively communicate needs and wishes. And some of those examples of a communication barrier, but again, are not limited to: the participant may use sign language, the participant's speech is affected by their disability, making them hard to understand by someone who knows not or does not know them, or the participant uses a combination of body language and vocalization, which requires interpretation, and the participant is nonverbal and would have difficulty communicating if an employee made him or her uncomfortable or afraid. So again, with a minor participant, you have to meet one of the criteria in number 3, and that will, you'll document that. The case manager will help you document those on, which ones you meet. And again, you must meet one of category B. The child's dependency in performing activities of daily living must be directly related to his or her disability exceeds that of his or her age-matched peers. Or 2, and again, it's one or the other that has to be met. The child demonstrates destructive or injurious behaviors exceeding that his or her age-matched peers, and such behaviors represent a risk of serious injury or death to others. So some of those examples, but again, these are not limited to, the child might strike or hit furniture, walls, or other parts of the environment. A child might break toys, rip clothing, or cause damage to things within their reach. And injurious behaviors, the child strikes or hits part of the body, the child strikes in another way, a child may take an action that could cause immediate harm to themselves or others, such as running into the street. The LRI review criteria for adults. And again, only one of these categories have to be met for participants age 18 and older. The participants' care needs have reduced or eliminated that legally responsible individual's ability to maintain paid employment in the past 12 months or longer, and there's no alternative caregiver who is functionally able to provide that care. Number 2, the legally responsible individual can demonstrate attempts within the first 30 days to recruit a qualified provider, traditional or participant direct services, but cannot secure one. Or 3, the participant has a communication barrier exceeding that of his or her age-matched peers that impacts his or her ability to effectively communicate needs and wishes. And again, that adult participant situation must meet one of the above criteria for the legally responsible individual to be approved. And again, some of those examples of this for a participant, an adult age 18 or over, but again, this is not limited to, that, that person requires extraordinary care that would require more often than compared to someone of the same age who does not have a disability. That may require more care compared to someone of the same age. So, for example, an adult, may do their own personal care. So, you wouldn't be responsible, is not in the normal realm for you to wash your loved one's hair, do, shave. Also, another example might be that as an adult, you would not arrange or cut up food as you meal prep for the individual. So those are some examples there, that would be someone who doesn't have a disability versus, what we're looking for in this criteria. The care provided is also necessary to maintain the health and safety if they are at risk for institutional placement. Again, that might be nursing home, intermediate care facility without the caregiver, someone that may include, assistance and adults. So that again is a few examples on the criteria that we will be looking for when we review participants aged 18 or older.
April, before we get too far ahead, I know you kind of talked about it a little bit, but some examples for category B, option 1 with the children. I don't know if it might be good to go back while we're still kind of there and it's fresh in everyone's minds. And just a quick reminder for folks too, if you do have questions along the way, go ahead and hit that Q&A button instead of the chat. Q&A button just helps keep us organized and make sure that we have a copy of your questions at the end. So.
Okay, Kelly, I have gone back to the minor participants. The category B, you have to meet one criteria or the other. In category B, the child's dependency in performing activities of daily living must be directly related to his or her disability exceeding that or her age-matched peers, or the child demonstrates destructive or injurious behaviors exceeding that of his or her age-matched peers, and such behaviors represent a risk of serious injury or death to self or others. So again, some of those examples that we might be looking for as our reviewers review that criteria when you're working with your participant direct services case manager is that the child may strike or hit furniture, breaks toys, or there's injurious behavior, the child strikes or hits part of their body, child strikes another in a way, also that another example might be that, they may not understand that they need help, walking across the street, ensuring their safety, ensuring, that they need to look both ways before they cross the street. So those would be the type of examples that we would be looking for there in that situation in category B.
I think they were asking specifically about B1.
Okay. The child's dependencies in performing activities of daily living of age-matched peers. So, for example, some of the stuff that we would be looking for here is, so as an example, but these are not limited to when we're providing these examples here, is, by age 8 or 9, you have shown a child, how to check their water temperature, get in the bath or get in the shower, they're able to wash their hair, they're able to wash their body, prompt them to get ready to do that, but they're able to perform those duties on their own. So, whereas, someone with a child with a disability, you may have to not only prompt them, but you would also have to, wash their hair, do that personal care that they're starting to learn how to do. Another example is, you would not cut up a teenager's food for an age-matched peer with someone that doesn't have a disability. So that's the types of categories that, or the criteria that we would be looking for to meet in category B for those activities of daily living. And again, we can go back and clarify that category B again if we need to.
Yeah, I think a couple of folks had that same question, so I think that's good. I think we can go ahead. There's some other questions I'm seeing in the chat, or in the Q&A. Thank you all for putting your questions there. And several of these, I think will be covered as we get further into the slides. So we'll let April continue on.
Okay, here on the legal responsible review criteria, the review required at the time of hire, and again, this is for the home and community-based waiver, the Michelle P. waiver, the supports for community living, acquired brain injury, acute or acquired brain injury long-term care. So the participant direct services legally responsible individual hired on or after July 1st of 2024. And for HCB and SCL, remember that if you had been previously approved under the 532 process, that legally responsible individual does not have to go back through the review process. The review is required at the participant's level of care recertification. So that's for anybody that's never been reviewed before. So the participant direct services legal responsible individual hired from March the 20th through April the 30th of 2024, or for participant direct services legally responsible individuals hired conditionally between May 1st of 2024 and June 30th, 2024. And you'll go back those that during that time frame of May 1st through June 30th, they will be reviewed at the next recert. No review would be required for participant direct services legally responsible individuals who went through an approval process before March of 2020. And again, that's for HGB and SCL. And so, or non-LRI PDS employees. So if you do not meet that criteria that we described in the prior slides, then you do not have to be reviewed. Common questions that we have received about the hiring and review process. Does this process apply to Michelle P? Yes, the process applies to all 1915C HCBS waivers that allow PDS, again, which are ABI acute, ABI long-term care, home and community-based, Michelle P waiver, and supports for community living. How can the participant hire an legally responsible individual if they are unable to manage the hiring process due to their age and or disability? Participants who cannot manage the hiring process on their own should have a participant direct services representative who is responsible to assist the participant and or manage the process on their behalf. If you were hired as a legally responsible individual before March of 2020, do I have to require a review? If the legally responsible individual was hired to provide services in the home and community-based waiver or supports for community living waiver, they do not require review. These legally responsible individuals were approved using a form called the MAC 532, and we have it on the screen. And if the LRI was hired to provide services in the acquired brain injury, long-term care, or Michelle P waiver, they do require that review. If you were hired after March of 2020, do I require a review? Yes. The legally responsible individuals hired from March of 2020 to June 30th of 2024 must be reviewed. These legally responsible individuals were hired using a temporary approval process and must undergo formal review. Reviews for these legally responsible individuals will take place at the participant's level of care certification. For example, if your recertification is August the 1st of 2024, then the review would take place around that date. We have an example here also if the legally responsible individual, if they were hired using either the Appendix K immediate family member form or the legally responsible conditional employment letter, you are temporarily approved and must undergo the review after July 1st of 2024. Can the legally responsible individual participant direct services employee continue working while they wait for review? Yes. If a legally responsible individual is already working, they may continue to work for the participant while the legally responsible individual review is in progress. If a participant wants to hire a new legally responsible individual, after July 1st of 2024, the legally responsible individual must be reviewed before they begin working. How long will the review process take? Once all the completed information is received from the participant or the participant's PDS rep, then that target review determination is less than 5 business days once the case manager has it all submitted into Medicaid, the Medicaid waiver management application system. Does the review process take place yearly? No, this is a one-time process. Once the legally responsible individual is approved using the formal review process, they will not require review again. If I am a parent of a waiver participant over the age 18 and I'm not their court-appointed guardian, do I require review? No. Parents of adults age 18 and older are not considered a legally responsible unless the parent is the adult child's court-appointed guardian. Do the other family members require review? Other family members, such as siblings or grandparents, do not require review unless they fall under the legally responsible individual definition. For example, a grandparent who is a court-appointed guardian would require a review. A grandparent who is not a court-appointed guardian would not require a review. Do backup or standby guardians require review? No, if they do not meet the definition of a legally responsible individual and are not providing paid support, then you will not have to be reviewed. If a legally responsible individual is approved and working for a minor child and attains guardianship when the child turns 18, does the legally responsible individual have to be reviewed again? No. I have a power of attorney for a waiver participant. Do I require a review? No, unless an individual with a power of attorney for a waiver participant is also the legally responsible individual, they do not require a review. Why are legally responsible individuals subject to review and other families are not? Legally responsible individuals must be reviewed because they have decision-making power over the participant. Federal rules and regulations for waiver programs require states to put safeguards in due to potential conflict of interest in these situations could create. When attempting to hire a non-legally responsible individual, when does the 30 days start? The 30 days starts upon the approval for waiver services. What does a communication barrier mean? Is it only the inability to speak, or does it include a developmental delay affecting the ability to communicate needs? Any communication barrier and its associated care needs can vary from participant to participant. Reviewers will evaluate each participant's situation based on the information provided and will follow up with the case manager if additional information is needed to make a determination. How can the participants or the participant's PDS rep show attempts to hire other non-legally responsible individual employees? The participant or PDS rep can describe in detail the steps they have taken to hire other employees. Documentation is not required. However, you could submit emails with other providers, notes, or a log of individuals you've tried to hire and why they did not work out. Is documentation required when submitting a request? Responses to the criteria need to be detailed and may include additional documentation to support. Does the MAP 10 qualify as documentation of extraordinary care? No. What types of documentation can be submitted? You can submit any document you feel might be helpful, and below is a list of possible documents, but again, other documents may be included, but a few examples are, but these are not limited to just these examples: a child's IEP, results of a court order evaluation, behavior support plan, psychological evaluation, physician notes about individual care needs, employment records, or notes or emails demonstrating attempts to hire other employees. Again, you may use that Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit questions, and questions will appear as they are answered. And then here are some of our resources. Again, PDS Poly questions also may go to Dell. If you have questions regarding our 1915C waivers or help desk, there's the information for that. There's also the email where the Q&As were submitted for tonight's session. There, the Medicaid public comment and some other links. And again, this deck, as well as the recording, will be posted and will be sent out.
And I did go ahead and just put in the chat a couple of links to our our DMS PDS page, which is also there on your screen. That's where the recording links and the presentation links will be located. I also put in links to the recording and the presentation of the previous webinar that we held I guess it was last week. Sorry, I'm looking at my calendar. So if anyone wants to go back and review that as well. So we do have several questions in the Q&A. Thank you all for putting your questions there. All very good questions. A lot of them we covered, but I just want to go through and highlight those responses again, just to make sure that folks that we call those out and that folks get those answers. So I still see some folks putting stuff in the chat. If you don't mind to just put those in the Q&A. Okay, and I do see some folks asking for certain slides again, so we will get there. I'm going to go ahead, April, I'll just read off questions and we can go from there. So there was someone who was noting that the criteria for the adults does not include the history of behaviors. So they were concerned about what if your adult child has a history of behaviors.
Okay, so again, the adult criteria, I'm going back to that slide, bear with me, does not require the review of the behaviors. But again, if that is a concern and, that is preventing, the caregiver, the legal responsible individual, into reduction or elimination of, being able to work a normal, say, work hours outside of the home, then again, I would include those examples as part of the submission, and the criteria there also around one. So just because, we had a smaller criteria for the adults, but also, you want to paint that picture of, why you are needing to be approved for the legally responsible individual. So the more that you can support that, and again, the behaviors as an adult, again, to me and to our reviewers, that participants' care needs would fall there. So because you've had reduced or, employment based off that. So again, that's where I would put that criterion as adult for, like behaviors, and also, any supporting documentation you may have, you can also upload that if you wish.
Go ahead and step back one slide there, April, because the next question is about that 30 days, which I think we must have included in the provider one, but I think maybe we forgot to include here. And the question is, when does that 30 days start if the child has had the parent as an employer for several years?
So again, that was what we have there is for, that 30-day period would start, technically if you're a new legally responsible individual, but there should be also some documentation that demonstrates, that attempt, to do within that first 30 days. But also, again, note that there are some circumstances in specific situations where, from the start, there's complex medical needs or complex diagnosis that makes the child susceptible to, illness, immune issues, then also that information would be included there. You can include that in the criteria, and you can also support that with supporting documentation. So just kind of note that in some of those complex situations, the legally responsible individual is the best person to meet those care needs. based on the specific situation.
Okay. Here's another good one that I think, again, we covered, but I think it's just good to reiterate, is how long those reviews will take.
So once the participant or the PDS representative has worked to get this criteria, your participant direct services case manager, those agencies will work to help you, submit this criteria. And once that the case manager has submitted it, the task should take Department for Aging Independent Living, like 5 days to get that. So, you would get an approval, or, you would get LOI. The case manager would get that legal or the level that need requests for additional information. So, you would, that case manager would reach out to you, but also, those letters are going to be going out, once the Dell reviewer hits the submit button, either their approval or the LOI, the lack of information, needs additional information, would go out, or the denial. So, as soon as the cabinet reviewer submits, reviews and clicks submit, then that letter would go out the next day. So your case manager is also going to know. So that is how, you should be receiving notice.
So I have another question about, will they still be able to do respite hours while waiting on review and getting paid? I'm going to kind of interpret this to be, can we still work if you're already working as a PDS employee?
Yes, if you're already a PDS employee, there's not going to be a time frame where you stop unless you get the denial, and then there is a process to take if you should be denied. But during the review, if you're a current and ongoing legally responsible individual and you're working, then you would continue to work through this process.
Okay. Again, another one that we covered, but just want to make sure that it gets highlighted again. If you're approved when the child is a minor, will you have to go through the approval process when they turn 18, or is the first approval still good?
Now, if you've been approved as a legally responsible individual as a minor child, you do not have to go back through that review process as an adult when the child turns 18. So that review process is at one time.
Okay, so a question about the MAP 532 and if that's what they will be using for approval going forward. So I think probably be good to clarify there one more time.
Okay, the MAP 532 will no longer be required as part of the review process. The MAP 532, if you had been prior to March of 2020 for the home and community-based waiver or supports for community living, that would be uploaded. So again, that 532 is not required with the new criteria that has been outlined.
Okay, so the next one, is this review process just a one-time event, or is this required each renewal?
This new process is a one-time event, just like the prior MAP 532 process. Once you're approved, you're approved.
So I know we had a question earlier about standby guardians. This one I think is worth clarifying. So we have someone who says they are a step parent, and also the standby guardian. So would they require review? And I believe the answer to that would be yes, if you are also the step parent.
If you are the step parent and you are working in a paid support, step parent would be the legally responsible individual. Therefore, they would go through the required process if they are a current employee.
Okay. I am getting just a few very specific questions about, like, does this qualify? Does that qualify? So again, I would just refer folks back to the criteria. And or if it, or just go ahead and maybe email us. That way we can kind of, it's hard to answer those very specific things kind of publicly like this. So we don't want to get too deep into people's kind of personal situations. So is Okay, so we do have someone who said they were approved in 2019. So it might be worth going back to that slide where we go over who must go through the approval process. So the case manager told them they were having to go through the process, that everyone had to go through the process again. That's not entirely the case. So I'll let April kind of review this slide one more time so we can better explain who needs to be reviewed and who does not.
Right. So the review required at the time of hire, so the Participant Direct Services legal responsible individual hired on or after July 1st of 2024. The review required is at the participant's level of care. The Participant Direct Services legal responsible individual who has never been reviewed. So if you've never been reviewed for ABI acute, ABI long-term care, HLP or SCL, then you're going to go through this process. If the Participant Direct Services legal responsible individual was hired from March of 2020 through April the 30th of 2024, then you're going to go through the process if you were hired in that time frame. And also during the conditional employment between May 1st of 2024 and June 30th of 2024. You do not require review if you were reviewed for home and community-based waiver, legal responsible individual, or supports for community living if you were hired through the MAC 532 process before March of 2020.
Okay. Thank you, April. I think that is very helpful. So again, it depends on kind of where you were before that. So we would just refer folks back to that slide. Some questions about I was in one program before 2020, but then got hired into a different program. Hard to answer that one without kind of knowing which programs there were. So again, I would just kind of refer you back to the slide to kind of look at that. I'm trying to went through an approval process before, trying to figure out if maybe we can update that before we send it out in a way that might help folks make it a little more clear. April, I don't know, maybe we can look at that. It might be helpful if we kind of list out those waivers there. So we'll see if we can maybe clarify that a little further for folks. But essentially, if you were approved in HCB before 2020, that might make a difference. So we'll go ahead and try to clarify that later on. Let's see. Some folks asking kind of about their recertification timeline. So if they were recertified recently with their level of care, like in the last, say, month or so, does that mean that their PDS employees wouldn't be reviewed again until next year?
That is correct. So if you reviewed here within the last couple of months, you will go through that process at your next level of care recertification. So anybody here in the last, let's just say the last 3 to 4 months, so you'll go through that process in 2025.
Okay. And again, another question about when would I complete the application? Same answer there is like the application would be done at the time of the participant's level of care recertification. So if you had a recertification in the first 6 months of this year, you would not complete that application until the first half of next year. If you have one coming up later in this year, you would do it later this year. So it just kind of depends on where you are in that cycle. Okay. I have a question that could you discuss more about what you're looking at for adult participants? April, I don't know if you have anything else. I feel like we kind of went back to that one, but I don't know if you have anything else you can kind of add there.
Again, specifically in this criteria for adults. So, adults should be able to do those activities of daily living for their age matched peer. So anything, if you're having to prompt and assist day to day that participant with personal care, toileting, just simple tasks of daily living, then you're going to walk through and demonstrate on that criteria what exactly you do to meet those care needs for that individual. So, like, you don't do personal care for an adult without a disability, you don't cut up food, or you don't have to monitor and watch somebody. And then also, so that's the kind of the steps that you would walk through when you're meeting with your participant services case manager to fill out that criteria, and then any supporting documentation that you have, you could include with that to upload.
Okay. Okay, this is a good question. I think just once again clarifying who needs to be reviewed and who doesn't. The question is, can a person who's cared for my child since birth be approved to care for my child, or does PDS only cover me as a parent? And can it be me, mom, and his current caregiver? So that would go back to this definition here that April's gonna show us, and she can talk a little bit more about kind of who that is. But I do think it's probably important to point out this is not a process for all PDS employees. And certainly people who are not legally responsible can be PDS employees and they would not be reviewed. So there's some flexibility there.
Who's considered a legally responsible individual and who has to go through this criteria review? So a minor child under the age of 18. So that legally responsible individual, we have defined it as the participant, or I'm sorry, for the participant, minor child, the parent, the step parent, adopted parent, or the guardian, as defined, that an individual or agency or corporation appointed by the district court to have care, custody, or control of a minor and to manage that minor's financial resources. And again, that's the criteria that is set for the minor child. For adults, the two criteria that require the legally responsible individual review are the spouse and a guardian. And that guardian's a person appointed by the court to make decisions regarding the person of an adult. So, if you're a parent of an adult child and you don't have guardianship, then you would not go through that process. But if you're the guardian of the adult, then you would be considered a legally responsible individual and go through this process.
Okay, thank you. We're getting some pretty specific questions about situations maybe where one parent's representative, one's the employee, maybe they have guardianship, one doesn't. I feel like those are ones that we maybe want to take back, April, and look at and include in FAQ. So the folks who ask those, just hang with us and we will get you some answers to those. So just another question about understanding whether or not they need to go through the review multiple times. No, you do not. It is a one-time only process. So if you go under the review one time, what if your child they become an adult, they become over 18, switch waivers, whatever it is, they would not need to get approved again. So there's a question about, they say still a little confused about how they get approved to be a PDS employee as an LRI. I think probably the simplest way to break it down is, I don't know, April, if you want to go back. It kind of depends on, again, if you're going to have an adult or a child. If it's a child, there's the two-step process, two sets of criteria, category A and category B. The child would need to meet one of the criteria in each of those categories. And again, that process is will be done at their level of care recertification. And it's really just you providing as much information as you can about the situation and why this legally responsible individual needs to be the paid caregiver So I don't know, April, if you have anything to add there.
Yes, so, at the time when the participant direct services case manager starts working with the participant and the PDS representative, they, at the time of level care recertification, you know, the PDS case manager is going to know if you fit into one of the legally responsible individual criteria that need to be met. And so they will help you and walk you through the necessary steps to complete that criteria review that will be uploaded in WMA for our reviewers to review. And again, that's for that minor child. It's 2-step category, and you have to meet one criteria of each category B, A, and B. And that PBS case manager will help you walk through what those steps are and what's that the criteria to be. You'll submit information to meet those, and then also if there's additional supporting documentation. So as you approach the recertification, you should be that PDS case manager will be working with the participant or PDS representative to assist you with walking through these steps. If your participant direct services employee meets the criteria set for in the legally responsible individual.
Okay. So I know we've had a question once in the chat, and it's kind of come up again too in this Q&A. Let's go back and talk about the extra documentation. I think there's some folks who just are still a little confused as to whether or not documentation is required, what would be helpful. So it might be good to just take a look at that again one more time for folks.
So some of the common documentation, supporting documentation that, we would be looking for if you believe it would be helpful to submit would include, but again, this is not an exhaustive list. Child's IEP, results of a court-ordered evaluation, behavioral support plan, psychological evaluation, physician note about individual's care needs, employment records, or notes or emails demonstrating attempts to hire other employees. So again, this is not an all-inclusive list, but these are some documents that would be considered and supportive in nature to back up the supporting documentation that relates to the criteria and the review process.
Okay. Let's see, another question about the MAP 532. Again, will you be filling that out? No, that is an old form. That was what was used prior to COVID-19. So that is not a form that will be used anymore for this process. So we'll just go ahead and let's see. Again, seeing some more very specific questions. I'm trying to catch those as I go and just let folks know. Again, talk to if you kind of have questions about your specific case, we would definitely recommend that you discuss it with your case manager. They're going to be familiar with both the criteria as well as your situation. So they're going to be able to maybe better answer what that would look like, what information you would need to provide and what kind of how that would work. I'm kind of scrolling through because we only have about 6 minutes left. We've had a couple questions. I think this is a good one because we did not actually touch on this. In the event of a denial, is there an appeals process? So that might be something I think April
Yes.
we can discuss further.
An appeal process. If you are denied, you would receive a letter, and that letter would contain the steps that you take for action for, reconsideration, or also, you can go through the administrative hearing process. And so that letter is going to outline the steps that you take, and we can ensure that we can get what that language and criteria in that template is when we get our published FAQs out there. So again, it's if you are denied, you will receive a letter, a certified letter, and it will outline the steps that you can take towards reconsideration or again working towards, you know, appealing that adverse action.
Okay. It's good to note too that the previous webinar, and I put links to that presentation and to the recording in the chat earlier, goes into a little bit more detail about that appeals and reconsiderations process as well. So that information is there as well. I'm sorry, guys, I'm kind of scrolling through as I'm going here. There was one slide that somebody had asked us to revisit. I just want to make sure we get there. Yes, the documentation slide. Okay, we got there. So we're good. Again, seeing some very specific questions. So again, I would talk to you. I would encourage you to talk to your case manager. And if they're unable to help, it might be, you know, at which point you may reach out to us, but I would definitely start with your case manager. Some questions about if your child had an initial diagnosis and evaluation that is aged, do they need an updated diagnosis and evaluation? I'm not sure, April, what we would say about that.
I'm sorry, Kelly, can you please repeat that one?
Just a question about like if the child had maybe a evaluation or a diagnosis that they wanted to submit along with it, but the paperwork was maybe old, would they need to get a new one?
No, I would go ahead and submit, you know, if you have original documentation, the age of it, you know, that if there's still that same concern that's supported by that criteria that you have submitted and that supporting documentation supports that, please go ahead and submit that. There's for review. No required new information would be required.
Okay. A couple questions about the form or what they will need to fill out. So I think it's important to point out here, again, this is going to be an electronic process through the Medicaid waiver management application. Most folks on here are probably not going to be quite as familiar with that. It is the system the case managers use to enter information like plans of care and things. So they were trained on that just the same week that we had the webinar for you all. And what they will need to do is just collect some information for you that they will then put in MWMA, and then that'll go straight to Dale and they will be able to review it that way. So I know some folks are maybe thinking of a paper application. In this case, it will be an electronic thing kind of managed by the case manager. And again, they were trained on that. There is a provider webinar and it's linked on that DMS PDS page as well. If you are very curious and want to go look at it, you can. But that'll be kind of done that way. A couple of questions about representatives and whether or not they need to be reviewed. If they are not the PDS employee, they do not need to be reviewed. So, and I believe if they are the PDS rep, they should definitely not be the PDS employee, correct, April?
That is correct.
Yes. So, seeing some more about examples in that children criteria, especially for younger kids, that might be another one we could take back and try to provide some more clarity on, and maybe the FAQ. View process slide time frame. Okay. Would you go back to maybe that first slide? I think we had a question to review that real quick. And then we've just got like a minute left. So I'm going to just buzz through these and try to get the kind of the big ones.
Kelly, can you help me?
This one. Yeah, after the agenda.
Okay, this one right here.
No, the next one. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
There you go.
Okay, so this process for the legally responsible individual for participant direct services will begin, the updated process begins on July 1st of 2024. Your employee, if they are a legally responsible individual, may continue to work through this process. If it is a new employee, they will go through the process before they begin employment. This applies to the acquired brain injury, acute, acquired brain injury, long-term care, the home and community-based, the LP waiver, and supports for community living. This review, the review request submitted will be used by your participant direct services case manager, and they will submit this information through the Medicaid waiver management application system. And the requests are reviewed by our Department for Medicaid's sister agency, Department for Aging and Independent Living.
Okay, so we are right at time, and I know it's in the evening, and I don't want to keep folks any longer than we said we would. So just a couple of quick things that I'm kind of seeing recurring here in the Q&A. A lot of questions about documentation. Again, if you think it's helpful, go ahead and submit it. It can't hurt. April, you can disagree with me on this one if you want, but I think the answer to that would be, if you think it's something that is helpful and you want the reviewers to see, I would definitely just go ahead and send it in. There's no harm in uploading it. So there's that. A couple still, again, specific questions about that criteria. I would just, again, maybe when this recording comes out, listen to that, maybe go back and listen to the other one. And if you still have questions, feel free to reach out to us. April, maybe if you go back to that resources slide. And again, you can reach out to Dale. If it comes to us, that's fine too. We can work with Dale on the response. And we can just try to maybe clarify that further for folks if they really need it. And we'll also just take a look at some of these questions and see if there's anything we can do to clarify that criteria further in our FAQ. Again, be patient with us because we have another one of these tomorrow for providers, and then we'll start getting work on the FAQ. You know, we've all got to take a look at it. A couple different parties and folks here within the cabinet that need to take a look before that goes out. So have some patience. We'll work as fast as we can. There was one question about the attestation form. I don't think we really touched on it, but there will be a form that you'll be asked to sign once you have given all the information to the case manager, just to confirm that what you told them is correct, that they are entering the correct information. And again, if at any point you feel like there's a detail that's missing or something that you need them to put in there, you make sure to just speak up and let them know. Because obviously the more information, the more details you provide, the better off it's going to be. So, again, okay, good. Someone says they understand now. That's great. Finally, yes, the question about the recording. We have been recording this. We will send it out. I will try to work very fast and see if I can get it out before the weekend. If I can't, I will do it Monday, I promise. So we will work as fast as we can on that too. Again, so yeah, just again, a lot of very specific questions. So I would just, again, encourage folks to really have a conversation with your case manager. And if they are kind of struggling to explain it to you, you feel like you're still not clear, you can go ahead and reach out to us too as well. And we will do the best we can to assist. I know it's kind of scary, but some of this you may have to go through the process before these questions can be fully answered, but we will do our best, and I'm sure your case managers will too, to help you. So with that, we're kind of coming to the end of our time. April, do you have any closing thoughts or anything you want to share before we go?
No, again, Kelly, thank you all again for attending this evening. That was the reason why we wanted the best reputation we could get. So that was the reason why we chose the time that we did. We apologize for the Central Time Zone, but again, hopefully you were able to join us this evening and to clarify some of our participant direct services legally responsible individual questions that we've received. Continue to submit those questions. If you have specific questions, please, again, do not hesitate to enter them. We will review them. We will get you some feedback, and we will also get this deck and webinar out to you as well. And also we will work on a further edition of our frequently asked questions. We'll continue to work on that and get that out as quickly as possible. So again, thank you for attending tonight.